Hey there, welcome back. We are almost done. We are in our very last group of blending modes. Now, this is our component blending modes, and it's super cool. The reason it's called a component blending mode is it breaks color down into components. So we've got a few components here. We've got hue, which is like red, green, blue, that's hue. Next we have saturation, which is like how much color is going to be present. Next we have color, and color is going to include both hue and saturation. And then we have luminosity, and luminosity is basically the light level. So is it lighter or is it darker? So using these component blending modes, we can basically control, hey, do we just want to change the hue, or do we just want to change saturation, or color, or luminosity? And it allows us to do some really interesting things. So first we're going to take a look at hue. Now, if you want to change the color of an object in Photoshop, most of the time you want to be hanging out with a hue blending mode, okay? You would think it would be color, but the thing with color blending mode is it colors both the highlights, midtones, and shadows. It colors the whole thing with the same saturation as well, and that's not really how light works. Light gets less saturated than the shadows. So when you want to change the color of something, you don't want to use the color blending mode, you actually want to use the hue blending mode. So let's go ahead and show you how to do it. So here we are in chapter 3, looking at section 24 for hue. I'm going to hit open. There we go. And we're going to select out and change the hue of our sweater. So let's go ahead and grab a solid color fill layer. There we go. And we're going to change our blend mode from normal to hue. Now I'm going to invert this. We're just going to do a quick version of this. I'm not trying to do the perfect mask right now, just give you a very quick example. Alright, we have many tutorials on masking. We have masking cutting out your subjects. We have a tutorial called how to change the color of anything too. All kinds of really great goodies that go more in depth. For now, I'm just trying to show you the reasons why you would use hue and why you would not use color in that same situation. Alright. So, there we go. Pretty decent. So, here we are with our hue blending mode. So let's go ahead and double click on there, and we can see that as I change the hue in my hue slider, we are seeing changes in the hue in our image. So let's go ahead and hang out with a nice blue. Something like that looks pretty good. Okay, now you'll notice that colors are different in the shadows, midtones, and highlights, right? Let's just make a new layer here, and I'm going to grab my highlight color, which is here, okay? Somewhere in the midtones, right about here, and then deep into our shadows, we get right about here. Okay, so you may notice, let's just go ahead and grab our color picker here, that here in our highlights we have a saturation of 34%. Here in our midtones, we have a saturation of 70%. And here in our shadows, well, it looks like it's 78% too. I should grab a little bit more shadow color. Let's go even further down into our shadows. Alright, I think my color picker's on an 11 by 11 average. Let's go back to our point sample there. Alright, there we go. So that's deep down in our shadows, and there we go. Let's go ahead and sample this. We're at 74% saturation. So you can see we have a little bit of saturation in our highlights, quite a bit in our midtones, and it goes lower in our shadows. So that's basically how color works and how light works when it shines across an object. So if you want to change the color of something, you want to use hue because it keeps your relative saturations in place. So I'm going to change my blending mode from hue, we're going to go down to color. Now, you're going to see in the color blending mode that the highlights, midtones, and shadows are basically all the same saturation because color chooses your hue and your saturation for you. It's basically you're determining that's going to be the color of it. And as I change my color, you're going to start to see that, you know, some of these colors they start to like not look very natural because of the saturation levels in the highlights, midtones, and shadows. So color as opposed to hue, now we have a much more natural effect. Not to mention that if I just make this invisible, there we go, let's just change it to something that's, you know, not the original color. If I make this invisible, we can see we have basically the same amount of saturation from the before and after. This is a pretty saturated color here. It's pretty bright yellowish orange, and we have the same resulting saturation here because we're just changing the hue. And again, if we go to color, it's going to change both the saturation and hue, and it's going to give you something like this. Most of the time, it's just going to look kind of flat and a little bit fake. So let's go back to hue, and that's basically it. So if you want to change the color of an object, I highly recommend using hue. That's going to give you a hue shift and keep your saturation and your luminosity in place. Next, we're going to take a look at our saturation blend mode, which pretty much just changes the saturation of your whole image to the saturation of that color. We'll see you in the next one.